All right, good afternoon, everybody. And you all got the message this is recording, correct? All right, here we go. Hey, everybody, welcome to the DAV National Legislative Team webinar, Resolutions and Preparing for Your Department Conventions. What we're going to talk about to ensure that you are really prepared for your upcoming department convention, we're going to talk about understanding your department's constitution and bylaws and the resolution process, coordination and coordinating within your own department, and then, of course, the fun thing we call resolutions. So your department constitution and bylaws. Now, if you want to make sure that you have a very effective department convention specifically for resolutions to be adopted, you need to make sure you understand your department constitution and bylaws. So we recommend that you establish a meeting with your department leaders, your commander, your adjutant, your BPTL to discuss your department's constitution and bylaws. Make sure you're familiar with them and also have copies available for everybody to understand if there are very specific parts to your department C&B that is in reference specifically to resolutions. Some departments may have separate different resolution committees at their department convention. Some of them may be longstanding, some maybe be ad hoc, and some of them may even have people appointed or elected to them. Make sure you understand that process before you start. And also, some department constitution bylaws also contain specific information on when chapters must send their adopted resolutions to the department. Some departments, it's 14 days prior to the department convention, some 17. Make sure you understand what your department constitution and bylaws says in reference to when they must be submitted from the chapter and how the whole process is supposed to work at your department convention. Make sure you're familiar with everything in your CMB and have those available to any and everyone who asks. Now, as a reminder, the resolution process, and this applies to everyone, it usually will start with a member submitting a resolution to their chapter. Now, chapters that approve or adopt a resolution then we'll have to turn them over to the department to be considered generally at your department convention. Make sure you understand the time frames, make sure you understand the process. And then those that are adopted by the department will be sent to the National Legislative Director, Joy Elam, and they'll be assigned to National Convention Committees for consideration at the National Convention. This process is pretty much for everyone. We recently had somebody ask if this applies to national service officers, and yes, it does, because these have to be adopted by your chapter or department before they can be considered by the National Convention. So as a reminder, in order for a resolution to be considered at the National Convention, it has to be one that has been adopted and approved at your department convention. If it hasn't been, it cannot be considered at National Convention. Just making sure everybody's clear on the process and what's required. Now, coordinating within your department, you need to make sure you're requesting resolutions from your chapters prior to your convention. So if your deadline is 14 days prior to the National Convention, make sure you're identifying that in a memo, email, chat, smoke signal to make sure that everybody's fully aware of when they must have their chapter approved resolutions submitted to the department. Now, department committees also, depending on your constitution and bylaws, have the ability to pass and adopt their own resolutions, which will still have to be voted on by the department body. So make sure that you're requesting resolutions and that when they come in, you're assigning those resolutions to the appropriate committee, if applicable, within your department. For example, the Department of Virginia, which I'm active in, they just have one resolutions committee. So all of the resolutions that are adopted by chapters in the department must be submitted by 17 days prior to the department convention. And then they just go to one resolutions committee who reviews them, make comments, make recommendations, and then those are brought to the floor to voted on by the department body. So make sure you're coordinating well in advance to make sure you understand what's required, and most importantly, your chapters do. Because if your chapters don't know what to do and don't get them into you, you may not have resolutions to consider. Look at that segue. Well, what if you don't receive resolutions from your chapter, Shane? Huh? Anybody? That was a good segue. You're welcome. Well, you should introduce existing resolutions. Let's say your department reaches out and none of your chapters give you resolutions, but your department resolution committee could consider some of the existing DAV resolutions, adopt those, have them voted on by your department, and have those sent into the national legislative director, so those could be assigned to a committee at the national convention. So if you don't receive any from your chapters, that's okay. You have a department resolutions committee that could adopt some then and there and still have some submitted. So if you want to know what existing resolutions you can do, well, take a look at our current legislative program, which is on the website. We got a little linky rinky dinky right there for you to check out. It's on our resources page. Go in there and find at least a couple resolutions that you can adopt at your department convention, so you can have some resolutions considered for the national convention. Now, your adopted resolutions must be submitted this year, no later than Saturday, July 22nd, 2023. That's the deadline. And we are asking that you send those to resolutions@dav.org. Am I asking you to send those to Marquis Bearfield? No, I'm not. Am I asking you to send those to Joy Elam? Nope. Am I asking you to send those to Ed Hartman? By the way, we had 3 departments do that last year, send them to Ed Hartman for some reason. No. Where should you email them to? Resolutions@dav.org, no later than Saturday, July 22nd. So departments, if you have some adopted, get through them, get them submitted before the deadline, because we here at National Headquarters have to go through all of those and prepare them for convention, review them, assign numbers to them, assign them to the right committees, do an overview. So the quicker you get those in, the better. And I'm hoping nobody waits until July 22nd to send those in. Send those in as soon as you can to us to help expedite the process of getting those received, reviewed, and assigned to the appropriate committees. Resolutions. Well, you might be thinking, Shane, this is great and all, but how should we write a resolution? Well, I'm glad you asked, and I'm going to refer you to another webinar. It's called DAV Resolutions, Our Voice for Disabled Veteran Survivors and Their Families. It was released on February 3rd of this year. And look, there's a link right there for you on YouTube. It's probably containing one of the best voices in the business today. So you should give that self a listen and a watch, because wow, is it insightful. So if you want to know more about how to write resolutions, please check out our most recent webinar and we'll walk you through the process. As a reminder, as we noted just a second ago, chapters, committees in each department, you can write resolutions, and resolutions can involve issues locally or at the state or federal national levels. Well, what's the difference? A local issue resolution will be one that deals solely within a local or state jurisdiction or a local municipality. These that are adopted by your department should not be submitted to Joy. The national organization has no jurisdiction over resolutions that impact local or state level issues for your department. You might be thinking, well, that's great, but could you give us some examples? I'm glad you were thinking that, because yes, Jim Shuey, I can. And those examples are property tax exemption, because those are going to be local to a county, a municipality, or a state. License plate disabled, veteran, or handicapped. Again, those are generally going to be controlled by the state and or your counties. same as hunting and fishing licenses, as well as reduced or free tolls or express passes. These should not be submitted to the National Legislative Director. Why? Well, these are local issues or within your state that the national organization doesn't have jurisdiction over. We need to make sure we're keeping them specific to national level issues. And a federal or national resolution or issue will be one that relates to federal programs under the jurisdiction of the United States government, and generally, for our purposes, the VA or Department of Veterans Affairs. So areas to think about when you're writing or considering resolutions, you can think about the arena of VA compensation benefits, VA education and employment, VA healthcare, and VA national cemeteries. So those are some areas you can think about, look in, and find areas that you want to support for benefits that you believe need to be enhanced or changed. So a federal or national level resolution is generally going to impact federal programs, not issues that are local to your state or municipality. After your department approves, then these must be submitted to the National Legislative Director. And I believe just last week on March 24th, a letter was sent out to all department commanders and adjutants from National Adjutant Mark Burgess. This letter outlines the guidelines for submitting your resolutions for the National Convention. And if you need assistance with resolutions at the chapter, committee, or department level, please just reach out to the legislative department for assistance. You can reach us at 202-554-3501. And we are issuing a challenge. That's right. Marquis Bearfield said, Shane, I'm throwing down the gauntlet. I'm going to challenge each department to submit 5 resolutions. I was like, 5 resolutions, Marquis? Why don't we get 50? And Marquis goes, why don't we try with 5 first, Shane? And I said, okay, Marquis, that sounds like a good idea. So 5 resolutions. We're challenging each of your departments, at least 5. Now, if you are Al LaBelle from Wisconsin, you're going to probably do about 75 or 110, and that's okay. But we want everybody to submit at least 5. Give us 5 resolutions. Find either some existing ones or make sure you're motivating your chapters, providing them the information on how to write one, and get some from them to be considered at your national convention. So that's right. The challenge is 5. So to wrap things up for our preparing for your department conventions, specifically in reference to the resolution process, to ensure that you're prepared, make sure you understand your department constitution and bylaws, the resolution process. You're coordinating and setting up those meetings internally. You're coordinating within your department, advising chapters when resolutions must be sent in, make sure they're aware of the process, and you're assigning them to the correct committees or the appropriate procedures based on your department constitution and bylaws, so that you can have some that are adopted. And once they're adopted, you send them to resolutions@dav.org no later than Saturday, July 22nd. And if you have questions about resolutions, or if you don't receive any, or you want some assistance, please feel free to reach out and give us a call. And again, I am Shane Liermann, your Deputy National Legislative Director. There's my contact information. And I want to thank you all for attending today's very quick webinar about the resolution process and preparing for your department conventions. At this time, I'm going to stop the recording, and we'll have time just for a few questions if anybody has something specific they want to ask about the process. So give me just one tick,